Hi, folks. It's Paul Kattouf. Welcome to Taking the Edge Off the Middle East. I'm your host. I'm a senior fellow here at the Middle East Institute. What we do on this podcast is have a series of casual conversations that offer up insider knowledge about what's going on in the Middle East and why it matters to America today. And I'm really pleased to introduce my guest for this episode today, Ambassador Ted Kattouf, former U.S. ambassador to Syria and the United Arab Emirates. Ted, let's take some edge off the Middle East. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Ted, I was thinking we have at least three things in common. One, we have the Middle East thing. You served about 30 years in the Foreign Service, right? And then of almost 20 years as the head of Amideast, a great organization we'll talk about. So we have that. I'm here at the Middle East Institute. I lived in the region. We're both from the great state of
Pennsylvania.
Yes, the Keystone State. I'm from Hershey, Harrisburg area. You grew up in
the metropolis of Elton.
Yeah, but you have roots in the Northeast, Wilkes-Barre.
Well, my father was born in Wilkes-Barre, and we had cousins there.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this about me, but coal region.
Yeah.
Both my grandfathers were coal miners, anthracite, right?
Yeah. Well, mine were not. Mine were being from my family being from the Levant, the Eastern Mediterranean, traders, of course. Commerce.
Yeah. Commerce. You're not going underground. You're like, we're selling stuff. So that's the second thing. The third thing is I went to high school and graduated from Central Dauphin High School. I'm wearing an old seedy hoops. I was a hoopster, Duncan, back in the day, with your son, Paul Kattouf. And I want to say his untimely death last summer was a tragedy, and this episode I dedicate to honor his memory, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But I'm so pleased these three connections that we have bring us here together and have a great conversation.
No, I'm Paul wasn't big, but he was strong, so they made him a nose tackle on Central Dauphin football team.
Yeah, and he was a wrestler too, right?
He was a wrestler. He joined the wrestling team late, so he was more about strength and technique, but he still won some pretty good matches.
Yeah, and he was a great man and a great classmate. And shout out to all of our friends at the Central Dauphin High School community that's out there. Let's get into where we usually start in conversations like this on taking the edge off the Middle East, which is where we are today on U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. And you have had a long and distinguished career both in government and then in a prominent non-governmental organization, which we'll talk about, Amideast, connecting people of the region with Americans. We're recording this in the fall. This episode's coming out in early December of 2025. So we're about 3/4 of the way, a little bit more, into the first year of Trump 2.0, of the second Trump administration. You served, if you started in the Foreign Service in 1972, is that right?
That's correct.
That was the year that I was born, Ted. Can you believe that?
I can believe it because I had three children your age.
All right, yeah.
Surviving.
So we were having coffee at the Sheets up in Frederick, remember? And you're like, I'm old enough to be your father. And I was starting to resist that. And I'm like, what? And he was like, what are you talking about? You went to school with my son.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you served essentially from the Nixon administration in the Foreign Service, right? Because you had a bit of military service. We'll get more into your background. Through to the early years of the George W. Bush administration as ambassador to Syria. Is that right?
Correct. That's true.
So how do you situate President Trump's second administration in the context of recent presidents like that? Those you've served, those you've watched closely. What's he doing with his foreign policy in the Middle East?
Well, it's totally trite to say that Trump is transactional, but he is. He is not particularly interested, as we know, in human rights or in promoting democracy or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And the Gulf leaders love him.
Yeah.
Because that's what they want.
Yeah, they
don't want a guy who's telling them, preaching to them all the time about democracy and their having parliaments and releasing political prisoners to the extent they have them. Some of them do, and the like. And they like the fact they're into wealth and making money, and so is he and his family. And we need not pretend there's attempts to influence the course of his foreign policy in that region by doing also doing deals with
Right.
sons, with Jared, with Jared had no experience in investing. He was a real estate man along with his father,
Right.
and yet he was given $2 billion by the Saudi investment fund,
Right.
or SAMA,
Uh-huh.
to invest and try to make money for Saudi Arabia.
So do you think that's the only reason why Trump seems to prioritize the Middle East? Because if you look at in his second term, or are there other reasons? Does he see sort of potential there for his historical legacy? Because he got the Abraham Accords in 2020, including between Israel and the UAE, one country that you were an ambassador to.
Right.
Is it solely about the bling, or are there other things?
Oh, no, he wants, he wants always to be the best. He wants to be the guy who did most to bring peace in the Middle East, or any other place we can talk about. He does want that Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
My youngest son lives in Oslo. Maybe I shouldn't mention it. He might get. I think the Norwegians are literally afraid of the blowback because he didn't get the Nobel Prize this time.
Yeah, but maybe next year.
Maybe next year. But yeah, of course, Biden wanted to expand the Abraham Accords, and of course could not do that with Saudi Arabia because of October 7th, et cetera. And we can talk about whether Hamas was even thinking to try to undermine that agreement when they attacked on that day.
Yeah.
So no, weapon sales, commerce. We still need
oil.
We're the biggest oil producer in the world, but our allies still need that oil.
Yeah.
Japan, Korea, Europe. So
yeah, we're going to need a lot of energy.
So the same interests that have motivated all presidents, I'm sure, to some extent, motivate President Trump and his Secretary of State and his Secretary of the Treasury, and the like.
Yeah,
and they want, they want the dollar to stay the currency in which petroleum is bought and sold.
Yeah, but you think that sort of the personal family business and the ties that they have, that's what's one thing that distinguishes Trump 2.0 from those presidents that you served. That they're, George H.W. Bush and others, they were involved in the oil industry. But this is an administration that while they're in office, it seems like some of their family businesses are still making these deals, right?
As far as I'm concerned, this is unprecedented. You can't compare what the Trump family businesses are doing or his cronies with George H.W. Bush, or George W. Bush, or Hunter Biden and Joe Biden.
It's off the charts for your view.
It's exponentially so much more.
Yeah. And what about, we're going to get a lot, I think, into the Palestine-Israel question, but what about Iran and how he's handled Iran? And he came into office essentially actually sitting down with the Iranians to several rounds of talks and seeking at least ostensibly some sort of deal. He also notably had his team meet with Hamas figures from the Palestinian side of things. But how do you think he's handling that big file of Iran, and where are we today?
Well, it's been successive. It's been the goal of successive U.S. administrations working particularly with Israel and taking into account Israel's deep concerns that Iran not acquire nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And that remains the top issue in probably in his mind right now. Mm-hmm. And also, of course, Israel, I think their goals probably go well beyond that. I think they would love regime change. Not that Trump would mind that either, but that's not his primary goal.
Yeah.
And of course, he tore up the JCPOA, the agreement that Obama's administration had made with Iran in the first term. Said it was a bad deal and of course, Netanyahu had never wanted that deal to go through, even talked to our Congress, as you will recall.
Yeah.
Before the deal was signed, trying to get it derailed. Right now, Iran's vulnerable economically. We all know that. Has a water crisis, a restive population, at least in some quarters.
Yeah.
And the like. And they took a bad beating during the 12-day war with Israel and the U.S. now joining in. But I think Trump would still prefer to get a deal than settle this by military means. I'm less confident that Israel's interested in it.
Yeah, no, we're going to get into that. And last sort of question on the Trump before we get back into your background and the questions of Israel Palestine more deeply. How do you think the second Trump administration has handled the Palestinian file and the Israel file? Because basically, in October, they got to this ceasefire and hostage release of the last remaining alive hostages in exchange for 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. The ceasefires we're speaking seems quite tenuous. But where do you see in particular how Trump has dealt with, or has he dealt with, the Palestinian issue and Palestinian people and their leaders?
Yeah. Well, look, like millions of people around the world, I'm relieved that there's at least some semblance of a ceasefire right now. Mm-hmm. And that at least some humanitarian aid, not nearly enough, is flowing to the Palestinians, and that the Israeli hostages have been released, the live ones. I think Hamas is having trouble locating all the bodies of those hostages. Probably, I'm guessing about 30 or so that were 28 to 30 that were killed during their time in the holding underground. So that's to Trump's credit, of course. And Joe Biden did not do that. They both helped Israel, abetted Israel's war in Gaza with supplying everything needed, including things that probably should never have been used, like 2,000-pound bombs dropped on civilians in a small strip of territory.
You've been in Gaza?
I've been in Gaza.
Yeah. What was it like before this war?
Gaza has been referred to as the world's largest open-air prison, and that's one way to view it. But it also was a real society of people and clans and people who, most of the people there were refugees from the 1947-48 period from the areas south of Jaffa, next to Tel Aviv and central Israel and farther south. And indeed, many of them were originally in camps, and they built houses for themselves. They found ways to earn money, apartment buildings. You could see high rises that the Israelis bombed pretty much indiscriminately, I think you can safely say, in Gaza. So it was a functioning society, even with Hamas in charge, even with resources being diverted to tunnel building and the like. People, family in that kind of situation is extremely important, and people take care of their own.
Yeah, that's one thing. So I lived there from 1996 to 1998 and worked with an NGO similar to Amideast, but a different field, the National Democratic Institute. And the family aspect of it was what really struck me, is that people are individuals, but they're part of a bigger group, and the warmness and welcoming that I felt as an American going into people's homes, which I think now I talk to my friends, most of these homes are destroyed and there's a big process of rebuilding. But that culture is often not the thing that is exhibited in our own media, how warm and welcoming it is. And you come from that background, right?
Right. Not Gaza, but that general background, Palestinian ethnicity.
Yeah.
And what I would say before I go back and talk more about Trump is one of the things I'm proudest of during my 20 years in Amideast is the success we had in working with talented young Gazan high school students and helping them win scholarships to colleges and universities all over the U.S. And I don't recall there was any terrorist incidents from any of them.
Amazing.
During those 20 years. Imagine. But my last year at Amideast,
and let's hit the pause.
Pearls now. My last year at Amideast.
No, but let's hit a pause. Let's describe what Amideast is. We just jumped right into it. Tell everybody.
Okay. Well, Amideast has been an organization that has been around since 1951. It's a United States organization. It's not an Arab American organization.
And it's a non-governmental.
It was founded by some good American WASP. Including Roosevelt, including Ted. I want to say Dorothy Parker, but that's not her name. But she was
there's a group of people. So look, we're sitting here at the Middle East Institute,
right.
and there's a guy named George Kaiser who founded this place back
Right.
in the 40s. And these are people who experienced either through government service, or in some cases it was missionary work with Christians, or in other cases it was business. And they thought this is an important part of the world. And that was in the late 40s and 50s. And Amideast was founded by that same basic group
Right.
of people, that this is an important place and we should know the people, right?
Right. And so Amideast, originally they thought about it being a cultural organization between Americans in the Middle East, et cetera.
Yeah.
But not too long thereafter, it evolved into more of an organization that promoted educational and vocational ties with countries throughout the Middle East and North Africa. And Amideast back in 1970s won the contract from the U.S. State Department to manage Fulbright students from the Middle East and North Africa who came to the U.S. on U.S. funded scholarships, U.S. government scholarships, part of our soft power.
Yeah.
And what happens when those people go back to their countries is they are great cheerleaders for America.
Yeah, they're advocates.
Advocates. They understand how we do business. They're easy for diplomats, business people, cultural people deal with, et cetera. So it's been there's a huge payoff for the United States in having what Joseph Nye coined the word soft power.
Soft power. Yeah, no, and it's these social ties that are created, and cultural ties between societies. In some cases leads to marriage, right? And men and women and people coming together. I remember when I worked on the ground with this group NDI, some of my friends saying, look, had I not met you before, when this is back in the 90s. So if you remember, there's a TWA jetliner that had crashed in the Atlantic. And one of my friends, Palestinian friends, was like, if that happened and I didn't know you before, I might think, oh, well, those Americans, they support Israel's occupation and good for them. But now I know this guy, and I think about, well, maybe he was on it, or maybe one of his brothers or sisters. And that connectivity, that personal human connection, I think is very powerful. But back to Trump and Palestinians and how he's handled it.
All right, I'm not going to I give him very low marks. I mean, the ceasefire, we're
Great.
all
Yeah.
great. Biden didn't do it. He did it.
Mm-hmm.
Kudos to him. But basically, we at least kept the fig leaf of a two-state solution to this problem, with issues such as the status of East Jerusalem, at least, and the occupied territories being subject to negotiations with the expectation that Israel will have a two-state solution. There might be a bit of Israel beyond the Green Line, the 1940s.
Yeah, where the settlements are, and
where all the settlements are. But that was at least the fig leaf that successive U.S. administrations used.
Mm.
And we said that the occupation of Golan was just that, an occupation of Syria's territory. So in the first Trump administration, with Jared as the point person,
Kushner
is the point person, it was about the Abraham Accords and Israel making peace with Arab countries with which it had never been at war, like Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco.
Yeah. Some of those countries weren't around during the Arab-Israel wars, right? Like they weren't independent nations.
They weren't independent. No, they were not. None of only Saudi Arabia in the Gulf, and maybe in Oman, I guess.
Yeah, of course,
yeah, under British protector, but Oman,
yeah.
So what we've lost is that Trump wanting to court the evangelical vote, at least I shouldn't say evangelical vote, the Christian Zionist movement, if we can use that, who were mostly, almost all, evangelical.
But there are some
Christians.
conservative Catholics who are part of
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
And Trump has also done very well with the ultra-Orthodox communities in the U.S., up in New York City and Miami and places. And so he also got a lot of support from Sheldon Adelson when he was alive, the head of the Sands Corporation.
Yeah, yeah.
Now his Israeli-American widow runs the company.
Yeah.
And Miriam Adelson, and they are proponents of Israel, of Greater Israel.
Yeah.
And
he is an ambassador, Mike Huckabee, to Israel.
Mike Huckabee is the personification of the Christian Zionists, Greater Israel. Whatever is good for Israel is good for your soul in the United States, because there's I'm not going to get into theology, even though my grandfather and my great grandfather were priests, but I'm going to stay away from theology. But there's different theological interpretations of the Old Testament.
So, but you think that sort of political support and the connectivity ideologically he has essentially led him to lean towards and incline strongly towards the current Israeli government, and I don't see much engagement with the Palestinians and the people themselves. Am I missing something?
No, you're not missing a thing. The Palestinians, I think we've banned most Palestinians from coming to the United States who don't have a Jordanian passport or whatever. We've stopped Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, from coming to the UNGA this fall.
Yeah.
No, we seem to have a very punitive policy just because you're Palestinian. You're a Palestinian national, and you don't have another passport other than a refugee laissez-passer or something issued by the Palestinian Authority. Jared, I think pretty much, his the last ambassador to Israel and Jared's family, they supported settlements and settlers and the land. They don't have any, I haven't sensed any interest in helping to create a Palestinian or birthing a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
And, that perhaps has something to do with where we are today.
Yeah.
Is you got to give people hope.
Right.
And we've given the Palestinians virtually no hope that they are able to get out from occupation. And in fact, the Minister of Finance, Smotrich, who, of course, comes from the nationalist settlement movement and is an extreme rightist, he basically said Palestinians have, Palestinians here have three choices.
Mm-hmm.
They can leave, they can submit to our authority, or they can die. That was.
So you feel strongly about this, not only because you're a former U.S. ambassador who represented the country, but your heritage, as we talked a bit. You're linked to Palestine. That's where you come from, right?
Well, that's where my grandparents came from. My parents were born in the United States.
Yeah.
But their parents were immigrants. They were immigrants from the old walled city of Acre, which the Crusaders, the first city that the Crusaders conquered.
City. Yeah, beautiful.
And walled city. I have Palestinian heritage. But you know what? You read Aaron David Miller's book, The Much Too Promised Land. You read Martin Indick's book and all. They had, they got the Zionist narrative growing up. They don't deny it. They studied in Israel. They got all of it. That's fine.
Yeah.
They're good people.
Yeah.
And I think they had the best of intentions. And I'd like to think I'm a supporter of two states.
Yeah.
I want both people to live in peace.
Yeah.
You mentioned Paul, because I married, my first marriage was a woman from Harrisburg who happened to be Jewish. We met at Penn State.
Wow.
And we had 3 children in that marriage. Obviously, all 3 of them under the right of return, Israel's law of return. I'm sorry, not the right of return. Israel's law of return should be able to, if they wanted citizenship, they should be able to qualify. Then one of my sons married a Jewish woman. He has 2 sons. They should be able to go to Israel and claim citizenship if they wish.
Yeah.
My daughter, obviously, she can claim it. And her 2 sons, she was born of a Jewish woman, and they were born of at least a woman who descends from, a Jewish woman.
So are you going to make Aliyah?
I'm not. But I find it, I think we all should find it a bit ironic that, let me get this straight. How many progeny do I have? I have 4 children and 4 grandsons.
Right.
So 7 of the 8 progeny I have, all but my son from the second marriage, Michael, could go to Israel tomorrow
And become citizens.
and probably become citizens, whereas the descendants of my parents' relatives who lost everything in 47 and 48 and are scattered in Beirut and Amman, etc., have no hope.
Yeah. So, and basically, what happened in 47 and 48, your family, the Kattouf family, scattered, as you mentioned, to Lebanon, but some went to Nazareth inside of Israel proper and in other places. And essentially, you put it this way, a talk you gave in 2013, I was looking at, where Sykes-Picot basically decided who you people were in terms of national identities. Those things weren't as cohesive and as strong in the first part of the 20th century, right? And then they become much stronger.
Religion was the identifier in the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
And so even a Catholic and an Orthodox Christian in what today is Lebanon or Palestine, back in the 19th century or the early 20th century, their families would be outraged if they married out of the church. So even marrying a Catholic for an Orthodox wasn't good enough,
right?
Let alone a Muslim.
Yeah.
So that's how identity worked. Nationalism was more European introduction to the Ottoman Empire. Indeed, the Young Turks were influenced in overthrowing the caliphate.
Yeah. So back to your background and your career trajectory. So you're a Palestinian-American. What was the spark that took you? First, you served in the military, right? You grew up in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and you signed up. Did you go to Vietnam or no?
No, I was in the U.S. military for 3.5 years. 2 times I was on orders for Vietnam, but because drawdowns were going on, 2 times my orders were canceled.
Yeah.
And indeed, I was basically prepared in about November of 1971 to go to Vietnam. I had the orders to go to the Military Assistance Command, MACV, Vietnam. And earlier, I had applied to leave the service. I got a form that said, if you want to leave the service, I was what they call voluntary indefinite. So I was like midway between, I guess, a reserve and a regular officer. Yeah, you sign up for it. Well, I did that. But because I had actually got language studies while in the U.S. Army, I didn't think I qualified because it said if you had extra training.
What was your language study?
Back then, I'm embarrassed to say this to Brian Catoulis, it was Russian.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a good language, right? Yeah. And do you speak Arabic too or something?
I pretend to speak Arabic too,
Yeah.
And so I was stunned when I got ordered, when they said your orders are canceled and you'll be discharged on such and such a day. Because I'd always wanted to join the Foreign Service. I'd passed the Foreign Service exam before I went into the Army.
What was the spark that motivated you to think in that way, to take this Foreign Service exam and go in that direction? What was it?
I don't know. It might have been my heritage from a part of the world that very few people came from. You have to understand that mostly only Christians and Jews from the Levant and Druze, minorities, came to the United States.
Yeah.
When the window of immigration was open until about 1924, I believe.
Yeah, and I know where you grew up, right? Because my grandparents were in northeastern Pennsylvania, but I lived in a place called Pleasant Gap when I was really young, right outside of State College, where you went to college. And there aren't that many Arab Americans. It's mostly, like me, Lithuanians, Poles, Irish, and things like this. So, but it was people talking about where you came from that sparked your interest in the Foreign Service?
Perhaps. I'm not exactly sure. I think that's very possible.
Yeah.
Because as young as 9, I knew what was going on. But I was a voracious reader of news.
Yeah.
All international news and all. And I remember I think I was in 5th grade. I think I was in 5th grade when Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And the British and French and Israelis invaded. And I defended Nasser's right to nationalize the canal. It was on Egyptian territory. This was a colonial enterprise.
And there you are in elementary school in Altoona,
nobody
right?
had a clue on Suez.
Yeah, you're like, what the hell's Ted talking about? It's not Gamal Abdel Nasser and things like that. So you went down this path, and I read all of the amazing things that you did where you served in Iraq. You were part, if I recall correctly, the MFO that's in the Sinai Peninsula back in the 80s and things like this. Can you tell us what it was like as an Arab American, a Palestinian-American, to serve in the Foreign Service? Was there anything different or unique that you felt even before you became an ambassador, as you're rising through the ranks and you're mostly working in the Middle East, right?
Yeah. Well, when I joined in '72, there weren't many Arab Americans. Forget Palestinian Americans.
Yeah.
Most. Now there was one individual who we all said he's one of ours, Phil Habib.
Oh, yeah. Remind us of Phil Habib the younger
Phil
listeners.
Habib grew up in Brooklyn, and I think predominantly Jewish neighborhoods, and those were his friends and classmates. And he was a Lebanese American.
Yep.
And Phil, if the image of a diplomat is a Harvard educated or Yale educated WASP, Phil wasn't that.
Yeah.
He had the education, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a plain talking, he'd swear, and I think that's why he was good at dealing with Middle Easterners.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever work with him? Did you ever encounter him?
No, but I did encounter him a few times. I remember once or twice seeing him walking. I don't know where exactly, whether he was walking. Can't believe he was taking the metro, but I gave him rides a couple of times.
Here in D.C.?
Yeah, here in D.C.
Yeah.
And chatted with him. He was a role model for a lot of people. But back then, he was at the very top working for Kissinger, et cetera. But there were very few Arab Americans at that time. And I remember a senior official in NEA, when he found out that my grandfather was a priest, assumed I was Lebanese.
Yeah.
And I didn't argue.
Yeah.
Because when I was training in the what's called the A100 class, for the Foreign Service, we went off site. I don't know where exactly in Virginia. I can't remember where we went off site, but that's what happened in Munich while I was training.
Yeah.
And the killing of the Olympic athletes, and then the Germans killing both the hostages and the Palestinians that were trying to take on helicopters in Libya. And Palestinians have always been, not always. I don't want to do the victim thing here, because I had a decent, I didn't suffer from that
at all. Yeah, you had a great
but
ride.
The fact is that the image of Palestinians was set by Exodus, where the only good Palestinian later, I think at the end of the book, turned out actually to have Jewish ethnicity. And the movie Exodus with Paul Newman, and so that back then.
And then it was what Palestinian terrorists were actually doing in Munich and in other places that became the dominant image of
who the Palestinians were, hijacking planes.
But in the Foreign Service in the 70s and 80s, you never felt a need to, even though some people assumed that you were Lebanese because of Christian and things like this, as you said before, you never felt a need to mute that identity, or because one thing I think has been a deficiency, this is my view, in U.S. policy to the region, is that America's approach to Palestinians and the Palestinian people and the Palestinian question has often been a subsidiary to our relationship to Israel, and that we should have sort of a very rich and robust sort of approach with both peoples, right? And did you ever feel the need in the 70s or 80s when you were first starting out to essentially just keep your head down, I'm an American, I'm not hyphenated, all of that, or no?
To some extent I did, but with the name Kattouf and my looks, I didn't think I'd be fooling anybody.
Yeah.
But I didn't necessarily go into my whole genealogy as I just did now. Where my grandparents were from and my whole background and the like. And do I feel that maybe there's times when I might not have? And I don't want to go into it because like I said, I had a great career.
Yeah,
I was very fortunate. I'm very grateful to the U.S. government, the U.S. State Department, for the opportunities given me. I truly am. But do I think certain assignments might have been a bit difficult for me to even aspire to?
Yeah.
I had a great story. Being Arab American, and I'm quite tan today because I was just down in Florida with my daughter.
Why didn't you take me?
I have my daughter. Why would I need you? But at any rate, I was ambassador to the UAE, and I was back for my first consultation. I went to the National Security Council, and I was meeting with Zalmay Khalilzad, who was responsible for the golf at that
Yeah,
time back
yeah.
in the NSC. And I was waiting for him. He was about 20 minutes late, and I was ushered into his office, and he greets me, and he's so gracious. He's so deferential. I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I understand. He's Afghani. He went to AUB. He's very Middle Eastern, Central Asian. And he's so deferential to me. And so I'm so sorry I'm late. And, I shouldn't have been late, and apologizing to me and being so nice to me. And we start talking. And here I am, the U.S. ambassador to the UAE. And partway into the conversation, I realize he thinks I'm the UAE ambassador to the United States.
Amazing. Yeah. So I'll have to tell Yusuf Otaiba.
Yeah.
Like, people thought you were him.
Well, he wasn't the ambassador at the time. Everybody knows Yusuf.
Let's hit a pause. You have this lineage, and maybe if you spend like a minute or two telling us a little bit more about what you remember from the stories of your family and what it was like in Palestine back then.
Yeah, no, I've done some family research. You can only go back so far.
Mm-hmm.
But I treasure a picture of my great-grandfather, the priest, and his wife, who was part Palestinian, part Armenian.
Yeah.
But not from this is back in the 1896, this picture probably was taken.
Yeah.
So she was not driven, she was not part of the Turkish massacres or any of that, no. And there are 6 children, my grandfather, his older brother, and 4 women, all of whom married and all of whom had children.
Yeah.
Now, my grandfather, Kattouf, when he got to this country, he knew everything about the Orthodox Church, but he wasn't a priest.
Uh-huh.
But, a bishop got a hold of him in New York and said, "Young man, your priestly material."
So this is Greek Orthodox.
Orthodox.
Yeah. I don't know how this works as a Catholic.
It's you have Byzantine Catholics too, who
Yeah.
Uniates. You guys deserted us.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. It's all Greek to me. I don't get it. I don't follow it.
Yeah, but in any case, my grandfather in the late 19th century was a priest at an old Orthodox church in the walled city of Acre, which is a World Heritage Site, etc. His tomb, along with about 6 other priests who were early priests in the 19th and 20th century, are right next to the church, well tended, well cared for. So it's a touchstone. I know. Hey, I have no doubt where we come from.
Right. Yeah.
And he died great-grandfather died in 1901. And by the way, I don't want to out anybody here, but I'm going to. Have you ever heard of since you're a basketball player, do you ever hear of Ronnie Sakely?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. When you said out people, I'm like, where are we going with this conversation here now?
Well, when Ronnie Sakely first came to Syracuse, his family said, because he went to a boarding school in Greece during the Civil War in Lebanon, because they were living in Lebanon. They said, we're Greek. He's Greek.
Oh, yeah.
And then he's Lebanese. But in my great-grandfather's church, there are icons that were dedicated by the Sakely family, that very, very same family.
Place,
yeah.
So there was this, not with you, as you're saying in your career in the Foreign Service, but there is an impulse among some Arab Americans to essentially mute and sort of push to the background that identity.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Jews did it in the 1920s and 30s.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the Bechtel executive under Reagan, the defense secretary under Reagan was, sorry, you're young. You're a youngin'.
I sort of remember.
Caspar Weinberg.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Caspar Weinberg, I think, converted, was Protestant. He didn't want his Jewish ethnicity to be out there, and that was not uncommon at a time when there were covenants barring Jews from
that's right. Yeah.
buying homes in certain developments and areas and the like, etc. And Zionism was not necessarily among the sort of wealthier, maybe pro-German earlier arrivals in the U.S., German Jews and the like.
Yeah.
A lot of them didn't embrace Zionism right away.
Yeah.
They did not.
So more or less, you went in and spent 30 years in the public service of the U.S. government. We'll talk a little bit more about Amideast. But when you look back at that period from the early 1970s, essentially till right after 9/11 when you left. You were on the front lines of U.S. diplomatic service in the Middle East. When you look at the bigger picture of what we achieved and what you achieved, what would you say was the biggest accomplishment of that 30-year period when you were in government, either personally or what the U.S. got done in a big way?
Yeah, it's funny when you ask that question. There's a book review today in the Washington Post, I believe, by an academic out in the West Coast named Zugbi.
Uh-huh.
And basically, he said, basically his thesis is everything we touched, we messed up.
Yeah.
I don't think that's fair, but
yeah, there's a whole genre of books that are coming out that are saying that right now.
Yeah, something to warm the heart of an American firster, I guess.
But a lot of those books come from the left, right? Like,
right.
It's interesting is where it wraps around. Is
right.
You have academics and people, ex-officials, some of whom I hope
Steve Bannon is all for that kind of idea, too. That what the hell are we doing in this?
Yeah,
why are we bombing Iran? Why are we... Well, it's not Israel first, it's America first, MTG.
Yeah, but at the same time, they have an attitude of blame America first. They don't see the accomplishments. So what would you say when you look back on that 30 years, either what you were involved with, because I actually think there's a lot of good that is often ignored, despite sort of the wars in Iraq and other things like this. But what would you say would be the crowning achievement?
I think the United States, through many administrations, wanted crisis management, wanted stability.
Yeah.
So we had an ally in King Hussein in Jordan, who was there, and now his son, Abdullah. We have the Sadat in Egypt, and then we have Mubarak, and now we have Sisi, Trump's favorite dictator.
Yeah.
We have the Saudi royal family prospered. The Gulf monarchies, to the extent there was any overthrow, it was, a father and son in Qatar overthrowing his father back in the early 90s, etc. So there was
Hafez al-Assad
and Assad. These are family businesses, for God's sakes. Gaddafi, until we helped overthrow him.
Yeah.
The Moroccan monarchy. So we knew who we were dealing with. So I think if you're going to talk about an accomplishment, there's not some grandiose thing we produced. We didn't produce democracy in the Middle East.
We
didn't produce Arab-Israeli peace.
Yeah.
We didn't necessarily jumpstart moribund economies in North Africa and the like. But we had the preponderance of friends and allies during the Cold War that the Soviet Union didn't. They depended back then on Saddam, Hafez, Assad, Algeria. But we had the big kahunas, if you will, in the Middle East. So I would give successive administrations credit for that. Also, the Arab-Israelis, we did get an Egyptian. Kissinger deserves a lot of credit, and Nixon, for the Egyptian-Israeli peace agreement.
Yeah.
If Kissinger hadn't saved the Third Army of Egypt, Egypt wouldn't have negotiated that peace.
And people forget that they laid the foundation for a lot of the things and that was done at Camp David. And
absolutely. Yeah. So Nixon and Kissinger, even Ford and Kissinger, they deserve a lot of credit. And Carter deserves his credit for capitalizing on that and getting the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. And then in the 90s, even though we had nothing to do with Oslo, the Israelis and Palestinians did it behind our back for quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
The Oslo Accords, which didn't unfortunately work out very well. But still, we got an agreement, peace treaty. It sort of provided cover for King Hussein to make a peace treaty with Israel.
Yeah.
We worked on for quite a while without success on a Syrian-Israeli peace treaty.
Right.
Golan.
Yeah. But some good done, not all of the potential met. But what's the biggest, when you look back on this 30-year period, the biggest strategic mistake America made?
Well, that's a target-rich environment. As the military likes to say. Yeah. But I don't want to be too cynical. The invasion of Iraq opened
2003.
Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11.
Yeah.
Saddam Hussein might have been in fact, he was a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, absolutely
for sure.
Bad guy.
Yeah.
but we took care of him in 91. We got him out of Kuwait, and George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq, pushed by Cheney and Rumsfeld and neocons. Basically, we got bogged down in Iraq. We got a lot of Iraqis died. The economy went south,
right?
And so I would say the U.S. war with Iraq, Iran won, because the whole Iraq, Saddam was a bastard, but to some extent he was a bit of our bastard. He was our son of a bitch, standing between the Iranians, and the Gulf.
Yeah,
even though he invaded Kuwait, he understood later that if he was going to survive, his value was basically keeping his regime together in Iran at bay. And the 2003 war scrambled the whole thing.
Yeah, it ended a U.S. policy that some used the label dual containment, that we were containing the Iranian regime and the Iraqi regime at the same time. And
Martin and Dick was a big proponent of that.
Yeah, and it ended that paradigm, but then it allowed Iranian influence to spread and grow and things like that. That was then. This is now, I think, I'm of the view, the Islamic Republic of Iran is probably at its lowest point in terms of reach and influence. It lost Syria. Hezbollah is down but not out in Lebanon and other places. But that whole architecture of what happened in 2003, and then most importantly, in my view, is what the Iraqi society did to tear our own society apart. The divisions between Republicans and Democrats, the fact that body bags were coming home like in the hundreds every month to small towns in America, and people didn't understand what was going on in Iraq. And that led to this crisis of efficacy. Essentially, several U.S. presidents saying, we're going to do this, we're going to have freedom in the world, we're going to establish this and this, and then we're falling short. And now we're in this, I think it contributes to the moment we're in.
It's all of a piece, and it's hard to be counterfactual and say, well, what would have happened if we hadn't done this?
If Al Gore was there.
Right? You can't prove that. Yeah, no, you can't prove that. We're not going to litigate the Florida election again. No. Ralph Nader, he's actually still in Washington. And he doesn't.
Arab American.
Yes, and he would be. I said, who said Arab Americans don't have influence in this country? We got George W. Bush elected, God damn it.
There we go. All right. Thank you, Ralph Nader there.
Yeah. But more seriously, we managed, for a long time, and I hate that word manage because we should have done more.
Yeah.
But we managed the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Of course, it was always done through the eyes of the Israelis. Dennis Ross always said there shouldn't be any daylight ever between us and the Israelis.
Yeah.
So anytime any plan was going to be floated, Dennis Ross was a brilliant guy, and I give him a lot of.
He was on the podcast a few months ago.
Yeah, he's a brilliant guy and all, but I feel that Aaron David Miller, Martin and Dick, Dan Kurtzer, they all learned lessons from and that Aaron was even say we were too much Israel's lawyers. That wasn't our job to be Israel's lawyers.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be mediators, arbiters.
Yeah.
And instead we too often adopted Israel's positions as our own and didn't give any real options to the Palestinians. Like, I might be exaggerating slightly what he said, but that's basic.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so just a couple more questions before we turn to another topic. But when you look back, you're an Arab American, but you mostly served in U.S. government, but then we'll talk a little bit about Amideast and the period where this important NGO was building connections between the United States and the Middle East. How do you look at those who've, over the last 30, 40 years, who've worked in Arab American and Muslim American politics and trying to raise these issues? When you look at sort of the prioritization where Israel and its concerns were put number one, and then the Palestinians that we've discussed here haven't been a real priority. How do you see sort of the efforts of these communities to try to get organized, either recently in the 2024 election, but over the long trajectory?
Yeah. I will start by talking about Jews, because American Jews both are religion and an ethnicity. I think a lot of Jews at least see themselves as part of an ethnicity.
Yeah.
And for my generation of American Jews, I'm not American Jew, but I mean from the generation.
But you have family. You have,
I know the narratives. Trust me, I know all the narratives.
But you got it in the family, as you said.
Yeah, it's all in the family. I know the narratives. And for Jewish Americans after the Holocaust, who knows if Israel would have emerged in the way it did if it hadn't been for the Holocaust and the awful, awful things that happened throughout World War II to the European Ashkenazi Jews, perhaps some Sephardic too, but mostly Ashkenazi. But so there was sort of a unifying theme for the American Jewish community. The Holocaust that happened, never again.
Yeah, it was a cause.
It was a cause.
You got to defend your people.
The Jews who survived in Europe many of them would never feel safe. They needed a homeland. They needed a refuge, etc. Britain was sponsoring, it's the Balfour Declaration,
right.
1917, a Jewish homeland. Arab Americans come in, since 65, we've reopened immigration. So now Arabs come in all varieties. Muslim, Sunni Muslim, Shia Muslim, Orthodox, Christians, and we assimilate very well too.
Yep.
We do assimilate well.
And
traders.
You rise up the economic
ladder.
We do
it quietly. We're not out there. It's not as an Arab American. It's as whoever you are.
Yeah.
That you've risen. And there wasn't much organization. I don't think there was more than, before 65, I'm not sure there was more of a population than 200,000 Palestinian Americans in the United States. I could be wrong about that. And they were mostly Christians. So there was no counterweight. There was no well-organized. That's not anybody's fault, but it just describing the situation. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's not wrong. It's, lobbying is legal. Lobbying is part of the American system.
So can I tell you, when I lived in the West Bank and Gaza in the 90s, I saw the late scholar Edward Said, Palestinian-American, give a lecture at Bethlehem University.
Only the good die young.
And actually knew his son, played basketball with his son in the West Bank. And I saw him give a lecture at Bethlehem University, and it angered a lot of people because he essentially said America has got an open political system, that we ascribe all of these mystical powers to lobbies and things like this. And this is immutable, that we can't change this. And essentially what he was trying to say to his Palestinian audience at this university, which is a tremendous institution in the West Bank.
Catholic University
does great work.
The Villanova of Palestine.
There you go. Did I tell you I went to Villanova? You did. Pope Leo the 14th went there. Sorry.
Well, that explains a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It does so much. But the fact that he went there and people were upset, he was essentially saying, you have power and we can change this in the community. So do you think this community met its potential or no?
No. And, but as I said, it's a community that
wants to blend in,
has different identities.
Yeah.
Some people are more secular, some people are more religious. Their identity. But what is really, if you ask me, what has taken me most by surprise after October 7th, it's the outpouring of young people, including many young American Jews, on campuses, and around the world, who, have awakened to the fact that the Palestinians have been treated rather unjustly.
Yeah, they see them as human beings.
Yeah, they see them as human beings. They don't understand why they don't have the right of self-determination.
Yeah.
Why, when they yell from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free. By the way, I did not know that slogan. I did not ever speak that slogan or voice that slogan.
Yeah.
But, okay, a bunch of kids at Columbian colleges are yelling that. And everybody's saying, anti-Semitic, you're advocating the elimination of Israel.
Yeah.
Guess what? Netanyahu says we must control all the land between the river and the sea, and nobody says a damn word. Nobody.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Who has power and who doesn't?
Yeah.
So what is that offering the Palestinians when Smotrich says you can either submit or die or eat?
Right.
Netanyahu says we've got to control all the land from the river to the sea. Palestinians on the West Bank trying to harvest olives as we speak are being beaten and worse by Israeli settlers who are trying to drive them off the lands that they covet.
Yeah.
The IDF stands by or assists them in these things. I'm not, it's all this stuff, folks, has the added advantage of being true.
Right.
It's all documented.
Yeah, but the thing is, over there, or I would see some parallels here too, where when extremists on different sides feed off of each other and have this symbiotic relationship, right? When I try to write a report that says this is where the Trump administration has gone on the Middle East, and somebody reacts and says, well, that grade's not high enough and you're suffering from Trump derangement. I say, well, I think, okay, we're in this sort of discourse or dialectic that's not productive, where you don't even want to open your ears a little bit to see that there's a difference in my view, and maybe you can hear something in a different way. And I think what happens, and you said you don't want to talk about religion before, but when people adhere so much to their identity, so much in their safety and their security of their family, and when they feel under siege, it's almost impossible to punch through. It's almost the most human thing is to hunker down and sort of build your own coalition with the people who are with you, right? And I think the hardest thing, the most superhuman thing to do is try to, despite all the nastiness, to reach across the divide, which is what diplomats do, right? That's what
diplomats do.
Yeah.
And as you know, the diplomats at Oslo got to be friends.
Yeah.
If you watch the stage play or the film that was based on the documentary that was based on this docudrama that was based on the Oslo Accords and Terje Larsen and his wife and all, Well, listen, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
And this may upset some of your listeners, but why not?
Go for it.
Okay. I've been looking at DNA studies about Middle Eastern peoples in the Levant for 25 years.
All right.
And many of the guys who did the studies were in New York, Jewish guys, scientists, genetic or, Hebrew University and the like.
Right.
And I also watched recently a YouTube interview with a fellow named Nasib Nicholas Taleb, who wrote Fooled by Randomness and The Black Swan. And he was a trained scientist. He comes from Truth and Lending. He comes from a part of Lebanon, the Qura, that I grew up with the people from that area. And in Altoona, that's where most of them had come from, that part of Lebanon.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't talk about things that I don't know about. I don't talk about things that aren't peer-reviewed in studies. But he said the Palestinians, they have now looked at ancient Israelites, Judea, Israel. And they've looked at the DNA of different Jewish groups and Arab groups and all. And, the closest DNA to the ancient Israelites is Palestinians, particularly Christians from the north. That would be me.
Yeah.
In my ethnicity.
But why is that surprising?
Yeah, well, that's it. The Jews weren't all driven out. What people don't understand, it's a myth that in 70 A.D., when the Second Temple fell, Jews were massacred. Jews had been leaving for other parts of the Roman Empire for hundreds of years before that, including proselytizing and marrying Italian women and then closing the circle and converting people to Judaism. So even Ben Gurion, when he came to Palestine in the 1920s, first prime minister of Israel, and Ben Zvi, a Polish Jew trained as a historian who became the second president of Israel, they wrote that the Palestinians, a lot of the Palestinian peasants, were the Jews who never left, who converted first to Byzantine Christianity when they were being ruled from Constantinople, and then later to Islam because they wanted to stay on their land.
So, but this is why I said, why is that surprising? Because like I mentioned, I lived in Israel on the West Bank and Gaza in my 20s, right before I was married. These are beautiful people, Palestinians and Israelis. So like people, as you know, in your own life, your own family, as you discussed before, people will intermarry. People will fall in love and be people, right?
Right.
And that's what is perplexing to me about this moment right now. because we as human beings forget that basic element, and we get sort of solidified in our own political or religious identities. I'm MAGA, I'm Christian, I'm Jew, or whatever, Muslim. And you forget that is that people actually, when they enjoy each other, and I don't know, that's what saddens me about this situation
I
now.
believe that, now, don't get me wrong, Mizrahi Jews, who are the Middle Eastern Jews, Iranian, Iraqi, the real, not Sephardic, because they came from Portugal, they were originally in Portugal, Spain. They're also among the closest. The Druze, for some reason, are extremely close.
Yeah.
As are, of course, the Samaritans, the small group of Samaritans who live in the mountains above, or the hills above Nablus.
Yeah, so I want to turn this and close it. We have to. We're reaching sort of the end of our conversation. But one thing you mentioned about sort of people in Oslo seeing the humanity of others, and I saw this in the last week or so. Steve Witkoff, who I've never met, I don't know that he knows that much about the Middle East, but I saw him in the 60 Minutes interview with Jared Kushner, and I don't know if you saw this. If you didn't, let me tell you.
Sure.
He said in the negotiations with Hamas on the ceasefire deal, and then later in discussions with the right-wing extremists in Israel, he essentially said that he encountered a lot of resistance, and there's been so much loss, human loss and suffering on the Palestinian side, on the Israeli side. And what he deployed, and again, he's a businessman, he wasn't a trade diplomat like you, but what he essentially said is, I lost my son. My son died, and I think it was a drug death. And he said that we have a lot of pain from that. I do myself, but then we have to move forward. And he was saying to both somebody from Hamas, and he was actually in the room with somebody from Hamas, and then somebody who was an opponent to what this Israeli government was moving forward with on the ceasefire deal. And that, to me, I thought was an intensely humane moment where he talked about his own pain and suffering and loss. And even though I see them in a particular way, and a lot of the group, in terms of you can't apply business principles to diplomacy, but I actually thought that was a good. But do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree. I think I want to give some kudos to Trump and Witkoff and Jared. Being willing to meet with your enemies. You don't make peace with your friends. You make peace with your enemies.
Yeah.
I have no truck for Hamas. I have no support for Hamas.
You don't?
What they did,
as a Palestinian Christian, you're not a big no.
No. I mean, it's not. By the way, though, they allowed the Christian churches, as you can see in Gaza, to
thrive,
remain open and thrive. And they served as refugees, but Israel hit even them.
Yeah.
But the point I make is that Trump, Witkoff, Jared, they're open to dealing with who they have to deal to get what they want.
Yeah.
They're people who have that kind of business mentality. I might not like this guy. I might even hate him, but he has something I want, and I have something he wants.
Yeah.
And we can do a deal.
Yeah, yeah. And and the fact that he deployed his own pain and humanity to make a connection, and I was like, okay, that's an important thing. So can we spend a few minutes talking about Paul?
Sure. I was just coming around to it myself.
Yeah. No. And, last summer, first, just tell us about Paul.
Look, my son, Paul, my wife and I were divorced when the children were still just sort of teetering on teen years.
Yeah.
And it's not good for children. We all know that.
Yeah.
It's tragic. You all wish it hadn't happened or hadn't had to happen. But Paul, Paul had challenges like we all do.
I do all the day.
Well, I'm writing a history of the Kattouf family, and I believe I found a progenitor back in the early 19th century who had OCD.
Uh-huh.
OCD, I don't happen to have it, but OCD... clinical OCD. I'm not talking about somebody who's fussy, like Felix Unger on The Odd Couple.
Yeah,
but
you got to touch something.
You
got anxiety. You got to
Paul, from a young age, had to deal with OCD, which got in which mostly was repetitive thought. So he had difficulty sometimes focusing in his lessons, particularly math, because stuff would get stuck in his head and repeat on the same loop over and over again. And he had. Basically had three siblings who were quite successful financially, professionally, how
society defines success.
As society. But Paul went his own route. I know this is going to sound strange to some people, but he was a college wrestler, but he decided he wanted, and he was short, but he decided he wanted to try to get in the WWE.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, that was so cool.
And
I thought it was cool. He and Chip Zumas.
Yeah.
Chip, if you're out there, you're listening to this.
And he wrestled, wrestled local matches in York and Lancaster and all. He even had his own name, Paulie Katz or something. I don't know what the hell.
And what did you do as a dad? You just supported him, or
what else could you do?
Exactly.
He's in his 20s. I just told my grandson, one of my grandsons in his 20s, if you're not going to experiment now, you're never going to do it.
There you go. So that's the big advice from Ted Kattouf. Right. If you're not going to experiment in your 20s, when are you going to do it?
You're not going to do it, and you're going to regret it. So, meanwhile, I'm the guy who had 3 kids by the time I was 25.
There you go.
I needed me to give me advice.
Very well. Yeah.
And Paul, he had that, and he had other challenges he had to deal with. But he eventually got a college degree from Penn State.
Like you did?
Like I did. He, even though he studied international relations and political science, he gravitated towards working with challenged children.
Amazing.
He had a lot of empathy for people who were struggling, young people, kids struggling with challenges, autistic children, delinquent children, all of that. He had empathy for.
Yeah.
And he made that his life's work. Didn't get particularly well compensated for it, nor did he expect to.
No, but he cared for people. And the other thing I would say, because I connect back with some of the people I went to high school with in Central Dauphin, he had a good circle of friends, and people missed him and things like this. Okay. But tell us about his murder. And I said he had. And
well, as I said, Paul was courageous to a fault. I don't know where he got all that physical courage at. I'm not a particularly courageous guy.
Really?
I mean, I didn't volunteer. Send me to Vietnam. I must go. Why are you canceling my orders? But Paul was a very courageous guy, but too much courageous. And like once he was a night manager before he got his college degree at a motel in Harrisburg, and a guy came in with a trench coat and said, "I have a gun in my pocket. Give me all the cash." It's not Paul's cash. Give him all the damn cash. No. Paul jumped over the counter and chased the guy away.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, I'll be quick here.
Yeah.
Paul had words with a guy in Harrisburg along Front Street, which you know where that is.
I got married near there.
Yeah, along the Susquehanna.
Yeah, right in front of the
river, there. And they exchanged words. And he felt this guy and his girlfriend who was driving the car, were following him. And he took several turns, and they were following very closely. And so he parked in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral on State Street in view of the Harrisburg beautiful state capitol dome.
Right.
And he jumped out of the car and he went over to the passenger side where the guy was. And he said, "Why are you following me?" Not quite that politely, but that's what he said. "Why are you following me?" Paul said, "You need to get the F out of here."
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the guy and his girlfriend, we don't know. They had a gun. It was a licensed gun. They had a handgun. The woman tried to get it. The guy reached for it. And we know some of this stuff because there's video and because there is audio from a 9/11 call the woman made on her own to the police. And Paul discharged pepper spray into the car. I believe he discharged the pepper spray only because he thought he was going to get shot. And he started to retreat back towards the back of the car.
Yeah.
And the guy reaches around the passenger side window and shoots him with one shot in the chest. He died almost instantly.
Oh my God.
It was just a Sunday. He was just...
And it happens. People lose their temper.
He lost his life. And the DA said, well, pepper spray, the guy... Right away, before 24 hours have passed, DA Chardo said in Harrisburg, there are extenuating circumstances here. He had his wife, it was his partner, but he had his wife and a child in the backseat. I don't think it was his biological. That doesn't matter. He had a child in the backseat.
Yeah.
And pepper spray was discharged, and therefore he had a right to stand.
So this is like a stand your ground.
Stand your ground thing, except that if you read the law, if you're in your house or you're in your workplace, you can stand your ground. If you're in a car and you can get away, you're expected to get away.
Yeah.
Paul parked. They blocked him in. They parked perpendicular to him,
So he
couldn't get out. And the woman could have driven away at any point.
Yeah.
And they chose to stay there and shoot him.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
first, I've said this to you before, but I don't know how. I can't even comprehend a loss like this. Right? We have one son. You have 4 children. Three sons now, and
son's now surviving.
Yeah, and I just, again, it's such a loss that is so hard to take. But then, what have you done to try? Because they don't press charges. I read your article, but tell us a little bit about what you've done to try to get some sense of justice and closure.
Well, my former wife and I have cooperated a lot on this. On July, Paul was shot on June 23. I believe it was July 6. The Chardo agreed to meet with me, my daughter. My ex-wife could come, but she was just feeling she couldn't handle it.
Yeah, it's hard.
Understandable.
Yeah.
So my daughter and I were there, and he insisted we have a lawyer with us, so we had a local lawyer with us. And, he didn't, what I realized later is he only gave us bits and pieces of the full story. There was audio that he never shared with us that my lawyer, who also happens to be my nephew from Altoona, Anthony Kattouf, was able to listen to.
Yeah.
The police audio. They haven't released, maybe actually they did release it finally after a lot of badgering. But we know now that we think that Paul said before he was shot, "Oh, you have a gun."
Uh-huh.
The DA never told us that. We think that's the point where Paul released the pepper spray.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
"Oh, you have a gun." And he saw, we're assuming he saw the guy bringing up the gun. And he discharged the pepper spray. He missed really hitting them in their eyes or anything that would help. And he was shot on the spot.
But you've lifted up your voice. You put your name on an article.
I've written. I've backgrounded. I've given interviews to Penn Live, the former Harrisburg newspaper. I've given interviews to local TV stations. I've brought a court case to try to get the DA's office to release the video. It was from private cameras. If you're wondering why Josh Shapiro was attacked in his governor's mansion, it's because Harrisburg doesn't even have cameras around the state capitol that could have recorded this stuff.
That's insane.
I know it's insane. This was in one case, it was on a church's video, and another case on a private citizen's video.
Yeah.
And you can't really see into the car. You can see Paul, but you can't see into the car what was happening in the car.
Yeah.
Et cetera. And currently I'm working with my nephew, our attorney, on a letter to the DA of Pennsylvania saying that the stand your ground law is poorly written. It can be interpreted differently by different DAs. You're the DA of Pennsylvania. Don't you think you should do something about looking at this case and bringing some uniformity to what's expected of people when they're able to drive away?
Yeah, and I mean the key point here is you're not giving up.
No,
even though this decision was made.
No,
at this point you'll continue to fight for some semblance of justice.
My son was a fighter for the underdog. I want to be a fighter for my son. And by the way, I'll say this about my son: for many years he was a supporter of Israel. But when all of this happened, his name for Joe Biden, not mine, was Genocide Joe.
Oops.
Not the first guy to use that word.
Uh-huh.
And he wore a wristband with the Palestinian colors. And he had total empathy with what they were suffering. In fact, I can't even imagine what it's like to be a Palestinian in Gaza for 2 years.
Yeah.
Being bombarded and not knowing if you and your children would live to see tomorrow.
No, and I know when you came on here, and thank you for spending the time with us, you wanted to talk about your career and your life, but you can tell also what we give to the world and our children and things like this. And when you lose one of your children, I just can't even comprehend it, Ted. And it's so hard. But the fact that you will continue, and you are continuing to fight for some semblance of justice and closure, because you can never, I think, fully articulate how much he meant to a lot of people in his own community and people who went to school with him and things like this. And I do see a parallel, sorry to bring it back to the Middle East stuff, but the fact that at a time when there doesn't seem to be light at the end of the tunnel or any hope, to essentially say, this is important. This person was important to me, or this issue was important to me, or Palestine cannot be removed as a piece of the equation in a long, just sort of effort to get to a lasting peace, not a fake peace, but a real one. I see the parallels between the two. And thank you for what you've done in your career to serve our country, but thank you also for what you're doing for Paul's memory.
Thank you. From the river to the sea, both peoples should be free. Both people should be free.
That's a good way to close it. So I want to, that's all the time we have for this week, Ted. Thanks for coming on and spending time with us and sharing your experiences with us.
I have to pay you for therapy because this has been very therapeutic.
No, all right, good. Bring it on. All right, okay, that's good. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in and to our colleagues for their work on this week's episode. Please follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, YouTube, and all of that. Subscribe to all of our newsletters. Subscribe and give us comments. Give us suggestions on what we should cover in the podcast because we want to hear from you. You can subscribe to Middle East Institute email newsletters for our latest analysis and information and upcoming events. I'm Brian Kattouf. We will see you all soon.